What's up guys, this is Charles with Rocky Mountain ATV MC, and today I'm going to show you how to install the Tusk Pro-Fit Barrier doors on a Polaris RZR. The Tusk Barrier Pro-Fit Door is a full door, and what that means, it's a little bit taller than the stock door and it goes all the way down to the rocker panel. Why that's important is it will help protect you from any brush, debris, rocks, branches, that kind of thing, and keep them out of the cab. Now, if you do happen to tip the vehicle over or actually roll it, it will help keep your limbs inside the cab. Now, another cool feature about this door is the Pro-Fit design. And what that is, it allows for adjustment forwards and backwards, up and down, and the latch is even adjustable. Why this is important is every machine is a little bit different even when it leaves the factory, and this is to compensate for any manufacturing tolerances that might be different. Now, even through the vehicle's normal lifespan, you may need to adjust the door a little bit because things do shift around. Now, another thing that can happen, if you crash the machine, roll it, or something like that, depending on the severity of the crash, you might be able to get the door back into the alignment because of the Pro-Fit system. Now, installation will be the same for the right and left side, so today we'll be focusing on the passenger side door. To do this job, you'll need some basic hand tools, rags, and safety glasses. Before you begin, make sure you read through the instructions that came in the kit and get familiar with the install process. Also, make sure you have all of the hardware that comes in the kit. The first thing we'll do, we'll open this door and remove the seat. Keep in mind that we'll be reusing a lot of the stock hardware that we're taking off, so make sure you set aside and keep it organized. Now, what we'll do first, we're going to take this plastic cover off of the door panel. So we'll do that by removing all these Torx head screws. So we'll just pull that off and set it aside. Now that we have the plastic cover removed, we'll remove these two screws holding the door latch on. With the latch off, we'll now remove the 4 bolts holding this frame on, and we'll start down here at the bottom. This is a T40 Torx bit. Since we've got our T40 bit handy, we'll also take the striker out right now too. The next thing we need to do is remove this plastic side cover, and the reason for that is so we can get to these hinges right here. So what we need to do, we've got 3 screws, and we'll take those out. So we're going to take these door hinges off, and to do that we've got to take the pin out, and underneath you actually have an E-clip down here. So we'll just be taking a small screwdriver and we'll pop this clip off. Just a little guy, don't lose it. Take this hinge up, and then we'll also be reusing these bushings. So if these bushings are worn out, now's a good time to replace them. Now we can remove this bar. So what we'll do, we'll take this bolt out of the bottom, and we actually are not going to reuse this bolt, and then we'll take the 2 roll cage bolts out of the top. So this hinge post already comes with the side panel already loosely installed, and we'll actually leave it loose right now. But we'll take this trim piece and we'll start on this corner right here. We'll just set this in place right now, and we're actually going to cut it to length. So on this, we'll just mark it in line with the bottom of the cover. On this top, we'll mark it in line with this bolt and corner and just go straight across. To cut this, we can use side cutters or some tin snips, whatever you've got. So now we need to pinch this trim piece together where it's actually going to mount on the side cover. So next we'll line this back up and install it onto our side cover. We're now ready to mount the hinge post, and to do that, we actually have a couple different options. So the stock one, it mounts on a tab down here on the frame. It actually is mounted on the outside on the stock. We can move it to the inside if we need to, and that'll change where our door will be. And the reason for that, every machine's different, and especially if it's been tipped over, rolled, or crashed, anything like that, things can change and shift around. So we do have that option, but for us, we're just gonna put it in the stock location. So we'll get that into place, and then we'll take the stock roll cage bolts that we took out, and we'll put them back into the original holes. So before we tighten these bolts down, we'll wanna fit this bottom bolt in, and this is the button head bolt that came in your hardware kit. So with all our bolts installed, we can now tighten them all down. The next thing we'll do, we'll take the hinges we removed earlier, and we'll be installing these bushings back into this post. So once we do that, we'll take the hinge itself, we'll put it in place, and then this side cover actually came loose, as we mentioned earlier, so you might have to back off the nuts on the back side just a little bit, but we need it loose to put this pin into place. Once we have the pin in place, we'll put the clip back on the bottom. Make sure the clip seats fully in its groove. Now that we have the hinge pins in place, we can tighten down these 4 bolts that hold the side cover down. And all these are a 4mm Allen on one side, and we've got a 10mm nut on the back side. Next, we'll install our new door. To do that, we'll take the 4 bolts we took off our stock door and reuse them on these hinges. When we install these bolts, we'll actually leave them all a little loose until we get the adjustment we want. Now we can take this latch we removed earlier and we'll install it onto the new door. Now, when we do this, there are some adjustments we'll make later, so you don't have to get it too tight now. Just kind of snug these up. We touched lightly on this earlier, but every machine is a little bit different. Even brand new from the factory, you can have different manufacturing tolerances, and that's what's great about this Pro-Fit design. So the first adjustment we'll be making on this door, we've got an in and out adjustment, and then we can also move it up and down. So that's the first adjustment we'll make, but there are a lot of different adjustments on this door. So what we'll do, we'll kind of line this up, and we want it to run along the body line. So on this piece right here, you want it about 1/4 inch past this black trim. So once that's lined up pretty good, we'll take our T40 bit, and we're actually going to tighten the back bolt on each hinge. As you can see, we have a few different shims that came in the kit, and we'll be focusing on the door hinge shims first. So what we're looking for to use these shims, we want to have the alignment correct on these bars right here. You can see ours is a little off. And then we'll move to the bottom of the door and we'll check to make sure it's sealing on the bottom. So anytime you add or remove a shim, you'll need to check the fitment of the door on the body. Now that we've checked the fitment of the door, we know that we need to shim the bottom of the door closer towards the machine. So how we'll do that, we'll loosen the bolts on this lower hinge. We don't need to take them out, and then we'll just slide a shim in place right behind them, and that brings the door closer to the machine. So keep in mind, we're only doing one adjustment at a time, and that maintains the adjustments we made earlier. Now this shim goes in between the hinge and the door. And what that does is move this door panel closer towards the bottom of the machine. Again, we're just tightening this back bolt, and then the front bolt will just loosely install. So adding that one shim took care of our gap at the bottom. Now, if we still had a gap, we can add more shims here. But keep in mind, if we add more shims, it will slightly move this top of the door. So be aware of that. And once we have that tight, we'll also want to check this alignment to the door and the body. So now that we've adjusted the gap at the bottom and we've checked the alignment with the door on the body, We're good there, so we can now worry about the alignment of the top of this door. These bars on top, they don't align. So what we'll do, we'll actually be bringing the door in. So on this one, we might have to go 2 shims in on this. And then as we do that, we'll also make sure we double check the bottom to make sure we didn't create a gap down there. So checking the fitment again, our top does need to go in just a little bit, and we did create a gap in the bottom, but it looks like they need to both move evenly. So we'll add 1 shim to the top and 1 shim to the bottom. Okay, now that we've checked the alignment again, it looks like those shims did the trick. We've got our top lined up, and we've got the sill at the bottom, sealing all the way against that rocker panel, and we've got this door lined up against our trim. So what we'll do now, we'll open this back up, and we're going to tighten down all 4 bolts on these hinges. Okay, with all those tightened up, we can now install the striker. So on these bolts, I'm actually going to leave them a little loose right now, and that way we can move this around where it needs to be. And we'll take our Torx bit and we'll loosen the 2 bolts on our latch. So this latch, it's got some side-to-side movement, and then the striker obviously has quite a bit of movement all around. So what we want to do, we want to have this gap centered on the striker. So we've got this lined up pretty good. We'll tighten it down and then recheck the fitment. And we're looking pretty good right there. Again, what we're doing is lining up the striker bar that goes up and down in the center of this latch. Now that that adjustment's looking good, we'll actually shut the door and we'll see how the door fits on the machine. So we're seeing if it's really easy to close or really hard to close. So ours was pretty hard to close. So the adjustment we need to make is actually on the striker right here. So we're gonna shim this out until we get a snug closure, but we don't want it to close so easy that we lose the seal around the door. Now our door closed tight enough that I want to start with 2 shims and see what that adjustment does. And again, before we tighten these down, we'll center it back on this latch. Okay, I've got it lined up. We'll check the fitment. So that's pretty good. We've got a snug fitment, but doesn't take too much pressure. If we had that shimmed out even further, it might just close and we'll lose the seal. So if you had the opposite problem and it closed really easy and we didn't have any shims behind the striker right here, what we would do, we'd be shimming this latch. So let me show you how to do that. I'll add an extra shim in here to kind of show you what I'm talking about. So I've gone ahead and shimmed this up and I have it fairly exaggerated. So what happens now, we barely even touch it, the door latches, and we have a pretty big gap between the door and our body panels. So if this happens and the striker has no shims behind it, it's completely flat against this plastic trim right here, then what you'll have to do, you'll want to shim your door latch outward. So the shim itself actually goes between this door right here and this latch. And what happens, it brings it back, in turn pushing the door closer to the body of the machine. So I'll go ahead and loosen these bolts up, and we'll probably start with 2 shims and just see what it does. And keep in mind, since we've loosened this latch up, we're gonna have to realign it on the striker from side to side. It's looking pretty good right there, so we'll go ahead and tighten these bolts down. Now with those shims installed, we'll go ahead and check our fitment again. So the fitment on this, it takes a little bit of pressure to close it, not very much. Again, if it closes too easy, you're not going to get a good seal around it. But on the other hand, you don't want to have to force it shut. So we do have a good seal on ours, so the last step is to install the seat. And that's all there is to installing the Tusk Barrier Pro-Fit doors. These doors are available on our website with just about anything you could want for your machine, including OEM and aftermarket parts. So be sure to check that out. And if you like this video and want to see more like it, subscribe to our YouTube channel because we have a ton of other helpful videos on there. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments below and we'll get those answered. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.